All right, I'm just going to reset my views here. In case you ever get like lost, like my views are like on different screens, you can go up to Window, Workspace, and then say Reset. I'm going to reset everything back to normal. There we go. So I'm going to open up my robot. There he is. He jumps out just like he did before. His hands move. Now he has the little card that he's inserting. He hits some buttons. And then he has the music that's playing on his screen. And then there'll also be like little animations kind of going on in the background. A lot of this one is new concepts because we're working with audio. But then a lot of the other stuff is like that background that just swiped down. That's page transitions. We can use blips to animate little things going on. We can use anything in our arsenal to just animate stuff that's synced up to the music. The robot's just there because we have to have something playing the music. And then there's a little strobe light on his mouth. So now when it plays back, there we go. Now it's in real time. So that's as far as it is right now, okay? So little bits of animation, his head bobbing is synced up, the swipes in the background are synced up. So that's what I want to cover today, just how we can kind of play with some effects in After Effects to work on syncing stuff up to audio easier, okay? So the head bobbing, we should know how to do that. We're just animating rotations. And I just kind of synced it up to like when I found a good beat, like right there. So if you, sometimes you have to listen to the song like 4, 5, 6, 70 times, however many times it takes, until you kind of find the beats that you want to pay attention to and the beats that you want to be part of that animation. So that big like boom sound, that's where his head is moving from one side and then the other side. So every time that happened, I bobbed his head to the left or the right. And obviously I didn't want to go to the same side because it looked like the guy from Saturday Night Live. And some of these things happen pretty quick, so you have to play with it over and over again. Just like our signs, when we did the sign flipping thing, in order for those signs to look right, you had to have them spot on, lined up. If they didn't line up, if they were like a frame off here or there, then the animation looked kind of funky. So same thing here. If the animation isn't on, it's going to look off. So let's play with audio a little bit. So I'm just going to make a new composition just so we can play with this kind of free. And I'm going to drop my audio in here. All right, so here's my audio and it plays. There it is. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to extract information so I can use that for my audio piece. So one thing I can do is manually. So let's say I want to manually track what's happening in the audio piece. I can make a new null. And nulls are great because they're nothing, right? It's just ways for us to store information. We can use it to control things or whatever. So what I want to do is I want to store where certain beats are happening on this null. So I'll just name this beats. And what you may do is you may have several of these because you may find like a heavy beat where something is really obvious, like hitting every 1 second or so. And then you may find like little beats, like do 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 kind of things. And you may have a second line that's just kind of like those little things that you want to keep track of. Don't try to fit all of your stuff inside of one line because it's just not going to work. So I'm going to use two things. I'm going to hit the play button, and then while it's playing, I'm going to hit the asterisk button. Okay. Now, if I go anywhere in my timeline and I hit the asterisk on the keyboard, you see how it leaves a little notch right here. So what I can do is, as it's playing, I can get that beat down and know when it's going to come and just tap the asterisk to the beat. And that way I know exactly where the beats are happening. Okay? So then when I animate something, I need to line it up. Much easier to do because I can visually see where the beats are happening. So I'm going to delete the asterisk, the marker. I'm going to rewind this. I'm going to hit 0. I went too crazy. I'm going to delete all these. You get into it and it just goes. Alright, so I got the first 3. I'm going to go back and get some more. Let me set my playback here to, yeah, there. Oh, play from, there we go. Yeah, current time, why didn't you do that? There's a little wah-wah there, let me delete these. I don't like those. Delete this marker, delete that marker. Right about there. I think there's probably one more, probably about there. Okay, so that would be my 1 beat, and I can visually see exactly where those beats are happening. So if I want something to happen at that point, that's when I would do it. So I would just create a little animation. Okay, I'm not going to go through the whole process. Make a blip, make something that's kind of like in sync with what you think that sound would look like, right? So if you think that sound is like staticky, make a staticky type thing. And a lot of these, I'm just going to make a new solid real quick just so you can see some of the other stuff we can do. So I can go under noise, and I could add noise to this. There it is. And then I could animate this noise kind of coming onto the screen as I'm playing this. So right here is where that beat happens. So let's say I go right before the beat, I turn off my noise, keyframe it, go to where the beat happens, crank the noise up, and then I'm just going to set another keyframe just to say noise stay on for these frames. I'm going to go up to there and say 0. Okay, so what should happen now is that right as the beat hits, we get noise, and then a few frames later it goes away. Okay, because I don't want to obviously stay there forever. And then I'll just test it out in this first one. So that was kind of neat how that happened. Now I can take that animation that I have, and I can copy it, come down here right before the beat, and paste it in. Go down to the next one, go right before the beat, paste it in. And then again, I'll kind of preview what that looks like. Okay, so maybe even for that last one, because it's kind of like a little, that hard effect, and then kind of like a shaking is what I'm visualizing. Something like that. So maybe instead of going down to 0, I'm going to delete that keyframe, and maybe I'll go to like 40, and then I'll go up to like 100 again. I'll go to 20. I'll go up to 100 again. And then we'll go down to 0. Just to kind of give it a little bit of taper at the end. So that matches kind of good with what is happening in there, okay? So that's one way that we can do this, is literally just using that asterisk on the numeric keypad and punching in where stuff is happening, and then manually adding keyframes or animations to get that to line up. Now, that's kind of neat how that works. Now here's another way that we can play with stuff. So I'm going to create a new solid, and I'm going to add an effect to the solid. And this is a trapcode effect. So you can download this and play with it at home and use it at home, but you can't render it at home. You'd have to bring it here to render it. Otherwise, you're going to get a big like red X on your stuff, just because it's in demo version. So one of the trapcode plugins is this thing called Sound Keys. And what it allows you to do is it looks at that audio clip, and it can pick out certain sounds from the audio clip and create animations based on that sound automatically. So I'm going to tell it, here's the audio layer, that I want to use that bend sound dubstep. Okay, so what we're looking at now is a spectrum of what the stuff is, analysis of all the different sounds that are inside there. So think about like a piano. You have the bass notes on the far left, you have the treble notes on the far right. This is kind of showing the different stages of where the beats are happening. So as we hit play, you can see how this thing is going crazy. So I'm going to watch it and see if there's anything that kind of jumps up. Now I noticed like this orange one, when that beat hit, that orange one like spiked, like it went crazy. I'll see if it does it again. It does it again, okay? So now I know that that orange one is probably linked pretty closely to that specific sound that I want. So if I take this thing here, let me go back to where the beat's hitting, and I just drag these up here like this, what this is going to do is it's going to say, okay, anytime my orange gets into this bottom area, I want you to start registering something, and when it hits the top, that's kind of like the maximum point, okay? So imagine we're taking that beat, and now we're assigning it to an actual like value, okay? So the bottom of this, right when it enters this, the value is 0, and then as it goes up higher, the value is going to be, let's say, 100, okay? This green bar on the far right, that represents where that is at right now. So that's showing us what it's going to read, what it's going to output. So if we go back a little bit, you'll see that there's nothing in there. The green bar is empty because there's no orange in here. And as we get orange in there, it goes crazy. And then it drops back down. Maybe I'll raise this up just a bit. Okay, there we go. And so what I can do is I can then take that information and I can output it to a set of keyframes. So when I go down here to my range, it says, how do you want to handle this? Do you want to use the average, meaning that it's going to take those two bars and average them out, and that's what's going to give us our green bar? Do you want to use the peak, which is the height of it? Do you just want to find out where the height of that one is, whichever one's highest, and use that? Or do you want it to be an on-off trigger? So we could actually use this to drive a lot of different things. So I could literally say, when it goes into the orange, do something, and when it gets out of the orange, get rid of it. Okay? So it's kind of a neat thing. I'll show you all three of these, or the two, because these two are pretty similar anyway. So there's the average. There's our corners, which we set with these little dots. And then the fall off, we could obviously like soften the fall off if we needed to. I'm just going to leave it as instant though. Now here's where we have to specify what we're doing with this. So right now this is a 0 to 100 range. So what it's going to give me when I say give me some keyframes is it's going to give me 0 to 100. Okay? So when it reaches the bottom of this bar, it's 0. When it reaches the top of the bar, it's 100. Now I could have it be 0 to 1. Now where would that come in handy? Let's say I'm doing something that has to do with scale. I may not want, scale. I may not want 0 to 1, because if I do 0 to 1, my item's going to go from 0% to 1% of a scale, and it's going to be very small. But if I wanted this to be a full scaled item, 0 to 100 might be kind of cool, because I can keep it really small, but then make it come up really big. If I come down here to -1 and +1, I may have something that I want to kind of move up and down. If I go to 360, I may have something that I want to rotate. Okay? So as we get higher up in the green, it would rotate the item around to 360. As we get lower in the green, it would rotate it back to 0. All right? So again, we'll play with these just so you can see it. So I'm going to just say 0 to 100, and I'm going to say apply. Okay? So now what that does is it makes keyframes. So if I come down here and I hit U, here's a bunch of keyframes. And these keyframes will go from 0 to 100. So all I'm going to do is copy this and then apply that to something. So if I go to, let's say let me just make a shape layer. I'm going to turn that off for a second. I'll make a circle. There we go. I'll move my pivot point. That's where I want to move my pivot point. There we go. Cool. All right. So now my scale here is set from 0 to 100. Okay. So if I Alt-click on this, or not Alt-click, if I just click on that and then paste it, can't paste range 1, 2, 3. No. It's not liking the fact that I have one number here and I'm trying to give it two numbers. So I'm just going to right-click and say come on. I'll just do it this way. I'm going to alt click and then just drag my little pick whip down here. Okay, so that will give me these values pumped into this. So whenever that changes, the other one will change. So now when I hit, I can just delete this keyframe because I don't need it. Now when I hit play, so I've set up no animation to it, it's driving its own animation. So imagine now that we had a speaker there, right, that we wanted to kind of bounce out every time we hit that verb. We could do that. Now instead of it going from, let's go back to this, instead of going from 0 to 100, let's do a custom one. So let's say we have this go from 60 to 100. Okay, so I'm going to say apply again. That'll rewrite it out. And so now the minimum is 60%, so it's not going to scale down super tiny. It's going to stay here, and it'll jump up to 100. Okay, all automatic, all because we picked that range. All right, so let's also change this to something else. So if I go to my opacity, here's another value that typically goes from 0 to 100, right? We wouldn't have a negative opacity. We wouldn't have anything higher than 100 opacity. So we could also alt-click on this and drag this down and match that up. And so now not only will we get the size of it, but the opacity will also change. And we can always come back to this. Let me turn it back on. And I could pick a different range with this too. I could say instead of this being, there's range 1, here, I could drag it down to this or whatever and pick a completely different range. I'm going to keep it there for now. You stay there. Now none of this changes until I hit apply. When I hit apply, it'll actually apply the changes I've made to it. All right, so spectrum number 1 is done. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to just say you're not active anymore, and I'm going to play with range 2. So on each one, I can have 3 different ranges that I'm sampling from and writing out different keyframes to. So on this one, let's say that I want to grab a different sound. So let me listen to it again and see if there's another sound we could pick out. So I think that blue area might be an interesting one. Or even the yellow looks kind of neat. All right, so let's grab some of this yellow. So with this one, I'm going to grab down here, and I'll pull this all the way up. Now, if the yellow never touches the top, that's fine. That means that I'm never going to hit that 100%, so I may not want to ever do that. So I have this. Let's take this to be a 360, and then we'll apply it. And so now we have keyframes. We can hit U. And now we have output 1, which was the original one. We have output 2, which is the yellow area. And now we'll make a different shape. There we go. And let's also add a rectangle to this. All right, so there's my new shape. I'm going to hit Y and move my pivot point right there. Okay, so now if I were to rotate this, you can see how that's going to rotate. So now I'm just going to alt-click, and I'll drag my little pick whip down to output 2. Okay, so now this is going to go from 0 to 360. Okay, again, it's all automatic. It's all being driven by this specific thing, which is pretty neat. Okay, so now let's go look at the other one that we can do. If I go deactivate 2. Now deactivating it just turns it off for calculation. That's all it's doing. So it's not calculating it and trying to figure out what that's doing. It's just not active. So now I'm going to activate number 3, and for number 3 we'll just put it in the blue area here. I think we had some spikes in the blue. Yeah, so I'm going to pull this up to like there, because what I want to do is just have it so that the blue hits it at a couple points but not a whole lot. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to take this one to, oops, not that one. I'm going to take this to an on-off trigger, and we'll say instancer, and then we'll say apply. So now my on-off trigger, if we look at the values for this, right there, number 3, you'll see that it's still going from 0 to 100. It's no different in what it's outputting, because it's still going to output this 0 to 100 or 0 to 1 or whatever we specify. But the point is that it's either on or it's off. So it's either 0 or it's 100. There's no in between. There's no like 75 or something. So again, this is something we could use for opacity. If I created a new shape, make sure everything's selected, like this, and I went to the opacity, and I alt-click it, and then I drag the little pick whip down to output 3. So what it means is it's either going to be on or it's going to be off. So I just reset that, hit play. I may want to find a better beat. That's the one time it popped in. I think I'm going to hit that green in the middle. So let's go back to this. Go back to that. Let's pull this over. And let's change it to linear too. Let's see if we get that. There we go. So now because I changed this to linear, we're still getting 0 to 100, but then it's going to taper it off on the sides. So it's going to be a little bit of a transition on either side of it. So there we go. So that should be good. Okay, so again, all automatic stuff that we can use for our animation. So anything we want to do, we can drive with this kind of thing. Or at least use it as a way to kind of incorporate some of the stuff that we're doing. We also have some different effects inside here for playing with audio. We can take our audio and make it backwards if we wanted to. We can edit the bass and the treble. We can add some delays and flanges and other effects to edit the audio. So all of these are actually editing the audio itself. So I would go down to my audio layer and I would apply one of these effects like backwards. Weird. Okay, so that's what all of those are for. And then there's also some stuff down here. Generate. There we go. Generate. Here it is. Audio spectrum and audio waveform. So the spectrum, I believe we looked at this already. Let me hide that stuff there. So if I choose my audio layer for this, I hide the rest of the stuff just so we don't have to see it all. There we go. So what this is doing is showing us what the audio waveform looks like. We can play with the frequency. We can play with the maximum height. And this is just eye candy, right? So it doesn't really matter what the knobs do. Just play with them until you get something that you like if you're trying to use this kind of thing. Maybe you want to take the thickness up. Maybe you want to change the colors. Maybe you want to interpolate the hue just to kind of add some different colors in there. Maybe you want to get rid of the softness. Maybe you want to increase your frequency bands. Okay, so that's one way we can play with the audio and have it kind of visualized. We can also go to the audio waveform, pick our audio file, And this will give us this kind of like jaggedy line. And again, there's more settings that we can play with. So we can make this a left speaker or right speaker. We can also say this is dots instead of the lines, or we can say this is digital, so we'll get the vertical lines, which looks kind of similar to the other one. So it might be kind of neat if you had your robot like mine has that mouth, to have this kind of thing streaming across the mouth might be a neat way to kind of show off the robot. And then you have your start point and end point, so I can move this literally like wherever. And we could also take this is a fun thing to do, if I take it like that, like this. Cool. So I have this thing kind of locked into a layer, and then if I take this layer and I pre-compose it, and I move everything into the other layer, there we go. I'm just going to change my background color just so we can see this a little bit clearer. There you go, that'll be good enough. Okay. So if I take this layer, I can now make this a 3D layer, and then I can rotate it. So instead of it just following just that straight path, now it's actually a 3D layer and kind of flowing with the 3D-ness of it. And then I could, duplicate that. I can scoot it over. I can rotate it the other way. And so now I have them kind of coming on the side, so I can make a little scene with the stuff happening inside there. Okay, so this is a great exercise for using this kind of thing, because this is used more and more and more every day. So one thing I used for the robot too, like when I was controlling him, because I had his shoulder, his forearm, and his wrist and all this stuff, is I made a null. I called it left arm. And then I just made controllers so that I could very easily control what his shoulder's doing, what his elbow's doing, and then what his wrist and claw is doing. And so all this is I made a null. There it is. Set that there. Give it a name. Oops. It got confused because I called it left arm too. There we go. And then I just went to each one of these. Oops. I went to the left arm 2, and I went to expression control, and then I made a slider. And then you can call it whatever you want. So rotation, and I can duplicate it and call it elbow rotation, and then wrist, whatever. And then all I have to do is go and find that specific item, and then if I alt click it, I can drag this thing onto that expression control. Now when I click that, obviously it goes away because it's not there anymore. So what I have to do is click on this, hit the little lock button to keep that up there, and then when I drag my expression control to the right robot claw, then I could control the claw from that slider. So again, stuff that you can kind of think about if you're constantly jumping around between different things. Think about creating a controller that you can just link stuff to. There's no expression writing. It's literally just alt-clicking and then dragging the little pick whip to what you want it to control. Okay? So just more stuff to kind of think about. All right. So that should give you a pretty good head start into adding some audio stuff to it. You're using anything you want to use from your arsenal, from stuff that you used before, anything you find new that you want to incorporate into this. Explore, play around, watch videos where people have done this, where it's just audio matched up inside of After Effects without all the fancy stuff. The more stuff you put into this, obviously, the better it could be, but what you don't want to do is have it so muddled with all this stuff kind of going on that you lose track of what's happening in the song, right? So the part of this that makes it work is that we can hear certain beats and we can see the thing happening. If you pick up on something that nobody else is picking up on, it's going to be very hard to get the idea across that those two things are animated together. All right. Yeah. Okay. So